What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Doctor Who Series 11 review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Series 11 Episode 9, It Takes You Away. We're finally at the penultimate episode for Series 11, right next door to the finale now. We've literally got one more episode now, and then it's all over for Series 11 until we get to the New Year special. So, I was interested to see what this penultimate episode, episode 9, It Takes You Away, would be like. I was really interested. I thought the next time trailer was quite good. You know, a lot of the next time trailers for this series really haven't given much away, and I do appreciate that. They don't kind of draw you in as much as I think they could, but at the same time I do appreciate them not, giving anything away. So without further ado, let's get into this one, starting off with the cast. So Jodie Whittaker is the 13th Doctor. Very, very good. I mean, what else can I say? I think she's really good here as well. I think last week she was maybe a little bit better, and even in Kablam and all that, I think she was a bit better there. But she does have her moments in this one. I still think that now and again, I'm really not sure if it's down to the writing or if it's down to Jodie herself. I really think it's a mix of the two, but mostly the writing. There are some lines which I just don't really like. For instance, I think that she explains stuff way too much. Now, one thing that the Doctor does, something that is just kind of doctory to do, is really explain things in a very complicated way, but then kind of also do it in a way for the companions to understand so that we can understand as well. And I feel like, I don't know, that's the sort of thing that I think David Tennant and Matt Smith especially did that really, really well. Especially Matt Smith. He kind of had that quirky weirdness about him, but then he'd kind of explain things in a way so that you would understand it. Whereas Jodie Whittaker explained things in kind of this way where, I don't know, it just really is a bit weird. It just doesn't feel right to me. But honestly, it's the writing, and also the same way she kind of says things in certain ways that I'm also not a big fan of. I think in this episode though, it's not too bad. So all in all, I think Jodie Whittaker is very good in this one. Bradley Walsh as Graham O'Brien. What else can I say? I mean, Graham is probably my favourite thing about this series. Honestly, I think I like him more than Jodie Whittaker. He really is such a good part of the series and such a crucial part of the series. In this episode especially, once again, we get the emotional Graham back again. Graham does great jobs. Bradley Walsh does amazing with the hilarious comedy moments, but he also does really well with the emotional moments, and we get plenty of those, especially towards the end of this episode where he finds Grace. They go through this portal in the mirror, and it turns out that Grace is there, but it's because there's kind of this whole thing where this kind of alternate reality that they're kind of in, past this mirror, is the planet, I suppose. Is it like the planet or something is sentient, and it kind of makes people, it wants to draw people in, and it does that by making people look like deceased people to drag them in. So it brings Grace into this world, and Graham really wants to still have Grace around, so he gets really emotional, at the end where the Doctor's saying, you can't stay here, Grace isn't real, and I just really like that moment. His emotion is so good. As for, Tosin Cole as Ryan and Mandip Gill as Yaz, they're pretty good in this one as well. I've seen a couple of people say that the companions aren't used that much in this one. I don't really agree with that. I think Graham is used just in the way that he has the really emotional stuff at the end with Grace. That's really good for him. I like how Ryan has the stuff with the blind girl in this one. He talks pretty early on about how he doesn't really get along with children. He's not really good with children. But then we kind of see his journey throughout this with this child. And the blind child at the start doesn't like him at all. But towards the end, she accepts him and she thinks, you've helped me here. You're really good. So I really like that. I think Ryan has one of the better things to do in this one as well. And then Yaz also, once again, not too much to do, but a lot of the time she's spent with the Doctor, so she gets a lot of stuff explained to her, and I think some of her dialogue with the Doctor in this one is very good as well. So yeah, nothing to complain about with any of the cast here. Alright, so let's get into the story itself. So basically the Doctor and companions land in Norway in 2018 from what I remember. So it's present day Norway, and they find this blind girl inside this cabin. It turns out that her father has gone missing, her mum died a while ago, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Turns out that there's this mirror in her house, in the attic, and it's actually a portal. Now, I think a mirror as a portal is kind of a bit of a sci-fi cliche, but you know what? it works for me because it's something that, although yes it's a cliche, it makes it feel a lot more sci-fi, and that's one thing that I think Doctor Who this series has really lacked. So it makes it feel much more Doctor Who like, much like in Kablam, where we have, the robots taking over the world, they're taking over us, they're taking over humanity. It's a bit of a cliche, but it makes it feel like Doctor Who. That's the same here. This whole mirror portal thing, it's very cliche, but it works, and I think it really adds to it. So I like how, when they go through the portal, first of all, when the Doctor goes through the portal initially, just kind of briefly goes through, I really love that effect. I think it looks really good. And when she comes out of there, she's like, oh my god, what have I just witnessed? What is going on? Really great moment there for Jodie Whittaker. Yeah, really like that. And then when they go exploring through the kind of caves, in between this portal and the next portal that they find, I really like that setting. It's a very dark, very foggy area. We find this weird guy, I can't remember his name. He's alright. I mean, he's not great, but he's alright. This alien dude, it's nice to have another alien character in there, I suppose. But yeah, we find that guy. There's also these flesh-eating kind of moth creatures. They're kind of like moths or flies or something. I could almost call them bats, but they're not really bats. They're more flies, moths. And apparently, they eat flesh, they eat people, so, I like how the guy is throwing food down for them, so that they don't come and attack, them, but then eventually, he ends up getting attacked because he doesn't stay still. And the fact that the Doctor and, is it Graham and Yaz, I think, they just stand there completely still so that they don't get detected, and, that alien just gets completely eaten up, that's pretty terrifying. And you know what? That's the sort of thing that I want from this series. That action is just the sort of thing that we really need more of in this series. So yeah, after they manage to traverse through this cavernous area, they find another portal which takes them to what looks like the same identical house, but it turns out this is actually a different world. The blind girl's dad is here. I think the blind girl's called, is it Honna or Hannah? Sometimes they say Honna, sometimes they say Hannah. I'm just going to call her Hannah just because that just makes, it's a more English word, a more English name. So yeah, Hannah's dad, turns out that he's there, and the reason why he's here is because he's found his wife, Hannah's mum, but it turns out that Hannah's mum is not actually real. This is this kind of sentient planet or whatever it is trying to draw him in. And I quite like that. And then, after that we find out that Grace is there, but it's the same story, and I just really I think that's quite an interesting concept. You've got this mirror kind of portal thing, which I think is a cliche, but it works really well. You've got these two very similar worlds, but with slight differences, which, yeah, it's kind of just like your parallel world cliche, but it works again. A lot of cliches in this one, but for me, you know what, most of the time I'd be saying, in Doctor Who, I'd be saying cliches, get rid of them, but in this one, especially for this series, I appreciate it, because this series has been so different, but not in a great way in some ways, that I think this actually works very well. So yeah, I suppose the main villain of this episode, of this story, is I don't know really. It's kind of the bats, the bats, fly, moths, whatever they are, the flesh-eating things. I suppose they are the main villain really, but also I suppose the other main villain is just this other world that they're in. We find out that once what's the name? Well, once Grace, for example, realizes that Graham's like, no, you're not Grace. Because Grace would never leave Ryan, because Ryan ends up going into the caves, into the caves with Hannah, and he's like, you're not Grace, you would never just leave Ryan in there. And then when she realizes that she can't draw him in, she just like pushes him back into the cave area through the mirror. I think that's really cool. So they're kind of the villain as well. It's a bit of a weird thing once again, and this is a big thing throughout this whole series. It's not we still don't have an amazing villain. We haven't had this series at all. We haven't had a Dalek-like villain. We haven't had a Cyberman, a Sontaran, a Silurian. We haven't had a Weeping Angel. We haven't really had a villain like that. We've just had these little villains here and there. Sometimes they're not even really villains. I think on the most part, and in this story, it does work. But I'm still begging for a proper good villain. I'm really hoping we're going to get that in the finale, but you know what? I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not really expecting it. From what we've got of this series so far, I'm not really expecting it. But you know what? How it works in this one with the villain, I think it works pretty well in this episode. So yeah, I was really enjoying this episode. I was actually really enjoying it. I think personally the pacing for this episode is probably the best pacing of the whole series. It's definitely up there, you know. Kablam's personally currently my favourite episode of the series, but I still think it dragged quite a bit in the middle. This episode, I said that really weirdly, although it does, you know, have those moments where the dialogue goes on for way too long and it just feels a bit boring. I think the pacing throughout with this one, with the action especially, is probably the best the series has got so far. However, there are a couple of bits that a couple of issues that I have. Firstly, you know, when the Doctor's trying to kind of relay to the people that, you know, these dead people aren't real, they're not real in this universe, they're just kind of illusions. She does that a couple of times, and it feels like, you know, she does it for Hannah's dad, she does it for a couple of other people, she does it for Graham. It feels like she's just going over the same things over and over again, and it really drags. I think that could have been done a lot better. But then the main issue with this episode is the frog. What were they? Why was there a frog? There was a frog, which turned out to be the sentient being that this planet is, I suppose. And it had Grace's voice for some reason. And I get that it was a frog because Grace's favorite animal was frogs. She loves frogs. But why is it a frog? And you know, if that couldn't be worse, it's the worst CGI frog I've ever seen. I mean, this really reminded me of something pretty crappy from Classic Who. And yeah, bit of nostalgia, but you can't say that's a good thing in 2018, especially with the budget for this series and how much better this series has looked. So yeah, the frog and just that whole scene, which, yeah, I said the pacing was good throughout this. That scene I think did go on for a bit long. The Doctor just talking to a frog. It was very serious for a lot of it, and for me it didn't work. The way the frog was talking, the way it was moving was just so cringy. I was actually laughing. I was actually sitting there on my couch laughing. So that did drag it down a bit. So, It Takes You Away. It's honestly taken me away a little bit because it's really confused me. I am really split. I've been split throughout this whole series. I've really had a lot of kind of crazy different opinions in my mind throughout this whole series. This could be the biggest, I don't know really, this is weird for me. So, a rating. I'm going to give It Takes You Away, I'm going to give an 8 out of 10 right now, because what this episode is really good for the first 40 minutes. The first 40 minutes of this are amazing, I think. I think they're really well done, the pacing's really good, and it's just really enjoyable. I really enjoy it. It's just the last 10 or so minutes that I think just really let it down. After, you know, after the emotional stuff with Graham, it just, once the frog comes into it especially, it just drags down a lot, and that really is disappointing for me, because other than that, this could have been a 9 out of 10 episode, maybe. But yeah, as it stands, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.